Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ad Project Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Schellerud, and today I'm joined again by Matt. So, Matt, it's awesome to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in the seat.
Yeah. So, up to this point, we've had Tony on, and we've had a couple of guest interviews. And when we were talking with Tony, the key things we were covering is what's all the action items that we can use to implement the strategies that we had initially talked about on previous podcasts. And so it's really like laying down the framework or the groundwork for everything that we're trying to implement for our strategies going into Q4. And so now for this episode, what we thought would be good to talk about is really what to expect for trends, because this is a super seasonal time of the year. And so how do we anticipate those trends going into it? What have we previously seen? And then what are the key action items that you can take away when optimizing your advertising to make sure that you're anticipating those trends versus reacting? So I guess, Matt, you just did a good post on this, or we put out a good post on how do we, what's the typical trends that we've seen? So maybe start at the beginning, kind of walk us through some general trends that you see going into the Thanksgiving, Black Friday time period. And then after that, we can proceed into December.
Yeah, totally. So the last 2 years on Amazon have been pretty volatile. So we've gone through a number of different waves. Like pre-COVID, things were really consistent. Post-COVID, just because of supply chain bottlenecks, Amazon inventory restrictions, and
just
then
major changes in shopping patterns and habits in general.
Yeah. It's made predicting conversion rates and typical metrics by season kind of challenging. With that said, though, Q4 followed typical trends, what we've seen in previous years, 2019, 2018.
Sure.
So even though there's been so much unpredictability in pretty much all other periods, Q4 remained really strong and saw pretty similar lifts as 2019.
Sure.
So moving into kind of the period that we're in right now, it's early November at the time of this recording. And what we see around this time of year is kind of a downward pressure on conversion rate. So we're moving a little bit deeper into the season, and shoppers are maybe being a little bit more passive with their purchase habits in anticipation of Christmas and Black Friday and all the deals to come. So we see quite a bit of window shopping in the weeks leading up to Black Friday. Traffic is on the rise, though. So you may not see any adverse effects in terms of sales. Both traffic and conversion rate affect your overall sales, your revenue in your account. That traffic rise this time of year, as people spend more time in their houses, temperatures fall off, often offsets that conversion rate volatility.
Sure. Yeah. And so one thing, as we're looking at this time period, and this is before Thanksgiving and Black Friday timing, earlier to mid-November, there's a lot more window shoppers as people are prepping for what they're looking to purchase, but they may not be necessarily pulling the trigger yet on actually completing the purchase itself. And so if you look just strictly at sales or ACOS, which ties directly to sales, you're probably going to see ACOS dropping off over this period, and that ties back to the decrease in conversion rate that Matt was just talking about. We are continually looking at this, though, as we've had all these supply chain bottlenecks overall, and there's a lot of stock shortages and everything too. And so it could push people to maybe pull the trigger a bit earlier just because they're worried about getting those shipments too. But in general, like what Matt said, is that we typically see conversion rates lower coming into this period. And then once Black Friday hits, at that point, that's when people seem to be making those major purchases. Is that kind of the take that you have?
Yeah. And it's most abundant, or it's the largest drop is the week before Black Friday. So
Sure.
When deals are right on the horizon, if you just hold out another couple days, potentially the items that you're shopping for, browsing, window shopping for, could be on sale.
Sure.
Purchase intent goes through the roof around Black Friday, but just before that, there's a drop off. The couple weeks before Thanksgiving, a little bit flatter, but still, kind of a downward trend.
Sure.
Varies by account too. Obviously if your products are cold weather seasonal or winter seasonal, you could see lifts.
So over this period, how are you approaching that? So as conversion rates, say they drop off the week before Black Friday, are you going through and significantly cutting back bids to try to maintain ACOS, or how are you approaching that overall? What's your take on it going into Thanksgiving period?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that answer kind of varies by the seller or the account at hand and what their goals are in the account. So if we're very ACOS focused and we're taking like a bottom line profitability approach, then we may want to taper bids off in line with that conversion rate decrease.
Sure.
The only challenge with that is now we're limiting window shopping exposure to our products. Like that audience is going to circle back and they're going to buy the products that they're shopping for at some point, most likely. So this period, even though it has lower conversion rates and oftentimes higher ACOS, it's a really important period for getting your products in front of shoppers and just setting the stage for future conversions. Yeah. So the higher conversion rates that you'll see later on offset the lower conversion rates that you see today. So my recommendation for anybody that's looking to build a brand on Amazon, have a strong Amazon presence, strong ranking, values the long term in their account, I would be a bit more aggressive and stomach a higher ACOS during these periods.
Sure. Yeah, and just tying into that too, so if you are super margin constrained and going into it and very ACOS focused, we get that. And in those cases, we are cutting back bids just in anticipation of conversion rates dropping the week before. But kind of like what Matt's saying is taking the longer term viewpoint, especially if you're working to build a brand, maintain ranking, all those different pieces. There's going to be a lot of people that week before Black Friday that are going through their browsing, they're clicking ads, they might even be adding your product to the shopping cart, but they're not going to complete the purchase because they're going to want to wait and then see, okay, does the price drop? Because you don't want that buyer's remorse where you just bought something and then the price drops the next day. And so with the attribution windows that we have for Amazon advertising, for a 7-day attribution window that we have for sponsored products, you may be getting people who click those ads, but they don't purchase within that 7 days. It doesn't show up as an ad sale, but it really impacts your overall sales. And so just remember that too, when we're looking at ad sales or we're looking at ACOS or ROAS, it just counts for those things that are actually in the attribution window. And if they're outside of that, it doesn't get counted as a sale, but it could have been driven from that original ad that you had. So it's really taking the longer term point of view, and coming into the shopping season, I'm completely aligned that in general, we want to stay aggressive during that period, even though we know that ACOS is going to go up a bit because we feel like we're going to get a really good return because people are just getting ready. They're prepping for that really high conversion season.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know you don't have limitless amounts of time too. And so going along with that longer term viewpoint, now is a really good time to look at very long-term results, prior year performance, longer data periods, rather than focused on day-to-day optimization or, what happened week over week. Really take a deep dive into your campaigns, trends, get to know your campaigns, get them in order, set the stage for a very organized, effective Q4. Ideally, you'd have done it already at this point, but just continue to deep dive and really look at big picture, what keywords drive results, where should you focus your spend, how can we get the most out of the promos that we're running, or how can we move through the right amount of inventory?
Sure. So as we get in, let's see, we've got the week before Thanksgiving, and then we have Thanksgiving Day, Black Friday, and then, just the overall shopping weekend. So what do we typically see going into that?
Yeah. So Thursday, often a slower day, conversion rates really low since everybody's, holding, or most people are holding out for Black Friday. Then it's off to the races. I mean, the traffic surges exponentially. It's like more than 100% lift in impressions and search traffic across most Amazon categories, some significantly more than that even.
Sure.
In terms of like the KPIs that we look at, CPC normally increases. Sellers, advertisers, they'll lift their bids to make sure that they're remaining competitive and own a large share of the increased search traffic. But conversion rates increase a ton along with CPC. And it's interesting, last year, the cost per click rise and the conversion rate rise were nearly 1-to-1. In prior years, we've often seen a higher conversion rate lift versus CPC and favorable ACoS over the Black Friday, Cyber Monday period. Last year, ACoS was essentially flat, in line with account norms. Big surge in traffic, costs per click went up, but conversion rate went up along with it. So big lift in sales, consistent ACoS is what we saw last year.
Yeah. Key thing to prep for like Black Friday and even Thursday as you know, shopping patterns continually move up as more people have deals during Thanksgiving and even pre-Thanksgiving. But as we look at like Black Friday, so first major thing is to just make sure that you don't have your budget caps in place where you're capping budget and running out of budget early on. So this is one of those days where you want to keep checking into your campaigns and making sure that campaigns are continuing to run. We know that conversion rates are going to increase on Black Friday. So you can go through and increase your bids overall to make sure that you're staying competitive with the higher CPCs. That's what tends to boost up CPC overall, which is what we saw last year. But just know that even though you're paying more per click, you're going to get a lot more of those people converting into sales overall. So the key point is stay aggressive going into Black Friday. One, make sure that you're not running out of budgets. And two, if you want to give yourself a CPC boost just to make sure that you're getting those top performing placements, that can be a great way to go. And really, you're setting yourself up for December too, because conversion rates really stay strong throughout December as a whole. So maybe walk us through kind of next stages. So we're at Black Friday. Now we're going to the rest of the weekend and proceeding into like early December. So what's like typical trends that you usually see?
Sure. Before jumping into that, I just want to circle back to one more actionable item that I think you should take a strong look at as you move into the Black Friday period.
Sure.
Sponsored display, audience retargeting, views,
sure,
or DSP view-based retargeting. So we just went through a period where there were a bunch of window shoppers, and we want to make sure that those window shoppers find their way back to your listing. And so sponsored display, views, audience targeting is a great way of doing that. You can set a custom look back, 7, 14, or 30 days. DSP is a better way of doing it since you have substantially more control. You can adjust your look backs frequencies to a much larger degree and control the supply side a lot more. But either one, get shoppers that viewed your product back to your product page. So
sure,
re-expose them to their product, remind them they looked at your product, they wanted your product. Now's the time to get them to convert.
I love it. Yep. You're turning all those people who are window shopping and they were strolling through, say it's a brick and mortar store, they're strolling through your store. You're driving them back to complete that purchase for those items that they were really interested in. Like Matt was saying, sponsored display is great for anybody to implement. If you're brand registered, just feel free to go for that, get that set up. It's pretty easy to implement. You can do a 7, 14, or 30-day look back. I mean, just high level, which one would you pick over this period? Would you go for the longer look back period or go for the shorter look back period? How would you do that?
Yeah, so for sponsored display, you can't exclude certain audiences. So ideally, you'd run 7-day lookbacks, 8 to 14-day lookbacks, 15 to 30-day lookbacks.
Sure.
So that way you can target based on intent and
and that's what we do for DSP. We kind of
audience.
structure it for each of the lookbacks and then adjust frequencies and all that other good stuff in the background.
Yeah. So for sponsored display, very approachable retargeting type. Very simple to launch. I would say go with like 14 days.
Sure.
It depends on objectives. Like if you use a 7-day look back, you're going to reach the warmest audience, the most likely to convert. If you use a 30-day, you're going to be retargeting shoppers that looked at your product long ago, and there may not be that brand callback, product callback.
It really depends on how aggressive you want to be. So if you want to be a little less aggressive and you're just trying to target those like super warm leads, 7 days would be great. if you want to broaden that out and really try to drive more sales, 30 days is a great way to go. So I guess it just depends on level of aggressiveness. If you want to do a rule of thumb, we could split the difference and start with 14, and then you can always add or change as you go. Yeah. Cool. I love that. Yep. That's a great take. So now we're into later Thanksgiving weekend and going into early December. So what's typical trends that you see compared to like Black Friday?
Sure. So Cyber Monday is incredibly strong. After Cyber Monday and kind of the Cyber Week, deals kind of start to phase out. Traffic will drop a bit, conversion rates will drop a bit, but they're still very strong relative to the rest of the year. So there's that initial wave of high intent shoppers and a major inflow of them. A lot of them will make purchases, spend a bunch of money, and then maybe they have to wait until their next paycheck to start buying more products or, working their way through their shopping list. Again, there's kind of an initial flood and then it tapers off a little bit, but then it picks right back up, like 2 weeks after that, a week and a half after Cyber Monday.
Sure.
And that's just because of like the pressing urgency of last minute shoppers. You have to get your purchases in, get products delivered, get them wrapped.
Yeah. Yeah. And so some keynotes, like earlier December, while conversion rates taper off a bit, they're still really strong overall compared to how they were before. And, as we're doing our math, we know that conversion rate's a key factor with our advertising. Cost per click is probably going to be a bit higher than we're typically used to paying as more people are getting more aggressive with their advertising, but you have conversion rate to offset that. So more clicks are going to convert into sales. And so, as you're setting your bids for Black Friday, you can probably continue the same type of strategy going into December. You may want to taper back a little bit. We're always monitoring this and making these micro adjustments as we go. But in general, they're going to stay pretty strong early December and then really pick up. We see waves in traffic as we go, but really what we're trying to adjust for is like bids and making sure that we're getting the right ads shown and the ads that are going to convert the best shown. And so really on the bid standpoint, you can take more of a constant approach as you get into Black Friday. Going into early December, you may want to taper it a little bit, but overall it's going to be strong through later December, whenever that Prime Day cutoff period is.
Yeah, it's an ideal time, like the week after Black Friday or the week after Cyber Monday, to regroup too. So you have this plan that you put into place that you execute on Black Friday. How'd it go? How did we move as many units as expected? Where do we need to push harder? Where should we throttle back? What keywords didn't convert as well as expected? Conversion rates are so high around Black Friday, Cyber Monday that if it produced KPIs, too high of an ACOS, too low of a conversion rate, whatever, it's not viable. It probably won't be viable the week after and the weeks leading up to Christmas. So you may want to figure out a new targeting strategy or kind of weigh your options. Do I need the sales more than I need, a low ACOS or a really profitable ACOS? It's a good time to just kind of regroup and see how the prior week to 10 days went.
Yep. Yeah. And so overall, like we've talked about in previous episodes too, we have our traditional ad strategies. As we get into Q4, they're just all amplified and the performance is just amplified. So like Matt was saying, just constantly reviewing performance as you go and then tweaking from there. We operate in a very dynamic market. So always keeping your thumb on the pulse for how you're doing is definitely critical as we go. And I mean, as we go into later December, like Matt said, we typically see traffic pick up quite a bit that week or two right before Christmas, where everybody's doing their last minute shopping. And that will go until pretty much the last day of Prime Day, or the last day of when Prime deliveries can be delivered for Christmas. And then once we reach that point, we see this dramatic drop off in both traffic and conversion rates overall. So one key thing to note is as we get later, and we'll cover this on episodes as we get a little bit closer to that time period, but as we get closer to Christmas, you want to make sure that once we hit that last day that you can get deliveries before Christmas, that you're going in and proactively cutting back bids quite a bit, because conversion rates are really going to drop. If you're using automated software, know that it's backward looking, and a lot of the times it'll say like, okay, well, last week performance was really solid, I should keep up bids. Well, we know that conversion rate's going to drop off quite a bit. So this is where like that manual intervention is so critical too. If you don't have that, you'll wait. You'll have high bids throughout that period after Christmas. You're going to see a really high ACOS, and then finally start cutting back bids, and you're probably going to waste a bunch of spend that week or two after. And so we tend to see that where CPCs stay higher after Christmas, higher than they should. And I think it's because a lot of people who aren't responding or aren't making those proactive adjustments going into that period, and they're really wasting a lot of money going into it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the sellers that aren't listening to this podcast, they're not going to proactively reduce their bids. Traffic's still going to be high. People are still going to be shopping in hopes of 2-day delivery, 1-day delivery, whatever, getting it on Christmas Eve or before Christmas. And since other advertisers aren't cutting back their bids and those delivery times are post-Christmas, conversion rate is going to drop, CPC is going to stay high, traffic's going to stay high. So it's a recipe to spend a lot at very high CPCs without the conversion rate benefit being there.
Sure. Yeah.
So be proactive.
Yeah. And so we've just gone through all these different seasonal trends that we have and that we've seen previously, but we'll throw out the big wild card that we have, and that's all the supply chain issues that we're currently seeing right now. Just personally ordering different things from Amazon right now and talking to other people, like shipping times are already delayed a bit from what I'm not seeing 2-day delivery on a lot of items right now. And so we'll have to continue to monitor that as we go. If we start seeing really long delays in shipping times, that can impact conversion rates. So we'll need to definitely take that into account. If we're seeing long times of like long shipping delays again before Christmas, like that cutoff might not be December 22nd anymore, or December 21st. It could be the 18th or the 17th, depending on how long it's taking Amazon to fulfill these orders. So that's a key piece. And then obviously just the inventory piece in general too. Watching your competitors, seeing if they're staying in stock, making sure you're staying in stock, and then making sure you can adjust accordingly. It's going to be an interesting year just with all the supply chain disruptions and all the inventory items and everything that everybody's facing right now.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the key takeaways that we have going into Q4. We'll be putting out a bunch of other posts. I just shared one a couple days ago, just going through some key trends that we see going into Q4, and we'll keep everybody updated on what we're seeing on the day-to-day front and if we're seeing any major changes that don't line up with these trends. So if you want to follow along, LinkedIn, connecting with me on LinkedIn is a great spot. Facebook's another great spot. Instagram. So those 3 platforms, we're always putting out different posts. So if you're not following me there, make sure you're doing that, or follow Ad Advance. We're putting out the same content there too. So, Matt, it's awesome to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, it feels good.
Yeah. So everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of the Ad Project podcast, and we'll see you next time.